Welcome to a friendly discussion. It's Laser Max. You can call me Laser. I wanted to talk a little bit about the meta in Blade Symphony, because this just hit my mind, which is kind of interesting due to the B1 change, B1 Tier 1. Blade Symphony, pretty much always, ever since I started playing in 2014, had a very small community, to the point where it was probably about hundreds of people playing, regulars, veterans, whatever you want to call them, the people who kept playing, and then new players dropped in, and they played for a day or two and dropped out, and very rarely we got a new community member. It was rather rare. So yeah, most of the long-time players, the veterans, they know each other, or not necessarily as friends, but they see each other around, they talk to each other. They've almost guaranteed, they're almost guaranteed to have played each other at least once. And so one of the side effects of such a small community is taking its toll on the development of the meta. The meta develops much slower because there's not as many people playing and trying things out. Bugs are discovered slower, and the meta as a whole just becomes undeveloped, or gets left undeveloped, in a sense that even after several years, you cannot be as sure of what the meta actually is as you can in another game where it's like dead on, you know exactly what the best players are doing, but you don't even know if the best players are doing the best they could with the game here. And it's true to a certain degree with almost all competitive games, but it's to a higher degree here. There are characters that are just not represented at all in high-level play, like Vanguard, who came out in, what was it, 2016, and old players, they picked her up and played her for a couple of games, and then, well, this character's boring, and then they stopped playing her. And so Vanguard's left in this sort of spot where no one really knows about her. You know a couple of her moves, but you don't really know how good she is in relation to the other characters. She might be good, but we wouldn't know. It hasn't really been tried. She was hardly even played in a tournament, and most of the really good players are older players that have already found a character they like and stuck to it. And so there's not yet a veteran that plays Vanguard the same way the other characters. Even if a character or a loadout is bad or not as viable, considered by many, there's probably a main out there, someone maining it, that's been playing for years and is experienced with it. There just isn't really a player like that for Vanguard. You could debate it, you could say Torepianas or maybe Seder, kind of. But I think you get the idea. And so a lot of the ideas in Blade Symphony are rather old, and whenever something changes about the meta, people are slow to pick up. And so this is the way Judgment's B1 Tier 1 used to be in 2014. It was changed somewhere around then, maybe 2015, and it was nerfed to the point where this beginning of the swing that starts behind me was cut off. So it started up slower and it had an overall lesser window to parry. But mostly what hit it was the reduced startup speed due to the swing starting later. And so the common idea about Judgment prior to this nerf that happened in 2014 to 15, the idea was that B1 was just an overall really good move, both in uncharged and in health charged versions. It was a really good move. It was fast. It was really hard to get to a judgment that was constantly using it to defend himself. But then when it got nerfed, it changed completely. But the general ideas of people and the things they'd learned about judgment stayed the same. And so people were still calling it fast, even though it wasn't after it got nerfed. It was like slow. And when I mean like slow, I mean if Ryoka were to do his B1 at the same time as Judgment, it wouldn't even parry. Ryoka would just hit him. That's how slow it was. It was like, yeah. It was an awful parry tool. Every time you tried to parry anyone with a quick interrupting tool, they would hit you out of the startup of it consistently. Even if you predicted it and you started the swing a little before them, it was just so slow that you couldn't compensate by predicting. And even if you did, the parry window is so small, because the swing was smaller, right? It didn't last for very long, so it was really hard for the opponent to accidentally attack into it and get parried. And so it was not fast, it was not a good parry tool, and this is why charging B1 became more popular, because well, when the tier 1 got nerfed and the charged version stayed just as good. In contrast, there was much more of an incentive to get to the charged version, and just in general rely on charges more, because this B1 tier 1 used to be like, and still is, probably the only good tier 1 move Judge has. Like, B2 is something you still use, but it's not good. Neither is B3. Heavy left is debatable, it's probably okay. But it's not like a high quality move you can rely on, like this. I would say probably the only other thing that stands out is F3, because although it's a slow fast, if you aim it up, it has really good range. So it's decent. And I saw Meow Hamster, which is a really old player, he's been playing for years. He said, when I talked about Judgment's B1 being decent for once, he said, well, it always used to be good. And I was like, no, the charged version used to always be good, but ever since 2014 the tier 1 version was garbage. And I went on to say that just because a character uses a move doesn't mean it's good, and what that means is that a character only has so many moves, and you gotta use whatever the best tools you have are. Just because this B1 was the best thing Judgment had, didn't mean it was the best thing compared to the other best things that other characters had. For instance, if I could use Ryoko's B1, I would use it like 100% over Judgment's B1. If they were in the same move list, but they aren't. They're in different characters, so I can't use Ryoko's B1 unless I want to switch. And it's also relative, like most of Judgment's tier 1 attacks, if not all of them, are garbage. F3 and heavy left are key. B1 is like, yeah, it's better than all the other bullshit like this, the side balanced, F2, God forbid F2, all of the heavies except heavy left. Whereas if you look at Phalanx, he has some really slow heavies that they might even be slower than Judgments, but you can still get away with using them simply because, well, this has no lock time. You can dish this out and do a fast side or block, and well, this covers a big area. Doesn't have the most lock time. It's just that it's such a big swing, it covers so far that it's unlikely to miss. It's most likely gonna either hit or you're gonna get interrupted, but if I space this correctly, I can make it so it's unavoidable. You have to confront it. And so you can't really say the same thing about Judgment's heavies. Yeah, and that's like something I found really remarkable, because it's not the first time I heard this. I heard it all the time before Harmony's Prelude, that Judgment's B1 was still good, but I never used to buy it. It was the best thing relative to Judgment's other garbage attacks, but being better than a B2 doesn't mean anything. Being better than Judgment's B2 means it's less garbage. Maybe good, but it had to be a lot better than a B2. And so, yeah. B1 is not like that. It's not whiff punishable in the same way or as easily. It's possible if you're using a katana, because you don't have a block, but yeah, now it's really good. You might even say it's like better than Ryoko's B1, because it got reverted and it was sort of nerfed for a reason. It used to be quite obnoxious to play against the Judgment, constantly interrupting you with it, but then again, if we look at Ryoko, he can pretty much do the same thing. You can see Ishmag like spamming B1 like it's like there's no tomorrow. He's constantly just like charging fast attacks, and whenever you do anything, it does a B1, and it works. He does it against other Ryoko players. He does it against Judge, because if he pairs with my B1, he just out prioritizes me with F2, and so this is not the only character who can do it. It's almost as good. And then you have Pure with this, which might not beat it in speed, but in active window it does. You can cancel it at any point. No, after the first part of the swing, sorry. And so it's not unique to Judge. There are other characters that you can fight against that will constantly parry you with balanced attacks and make it really hard to attack them. And so I see no reason for Judge not to have it, since it's an idea that exists within the game. And if you can't fight the Judge using a B1 to parry you, you probably can't fight Pure or Ryoko or Vanguard for that matter, right? Fucking B left. He left. I'm pretty sure this is probably the fastest tier 1 balanced in the game. No, actually, Pure's B2 would have to beat that, but Pure's no, Phalanx's B2. But Phalanx's B2 is hella punishable, even on hit, in specific situations. But this is like amazing. This is like a fast attack, but it's a balanced. But you get the idea. This is good now. It's high quality, not just better than the other tools. It's high quality, you can tell, because it hits all the time. It's really hard for other characters to compete with it, and that means it's truly good. If you can compete with other characters' high quality tools, then it's good, and this is. I'm not necessarily sure whether it's a problem. The game state isn't really the same as it was when it got nerfed, and so we'll just have to see about that. Maybe if Judgment start winning every single tournament like Ryoko did, we could make a case. But that seems to be about it. Small community, slow developing meta, a lot of old ideas that stay alive even though they should have died when the game state changed. But just because the game changes doesn't mean that people's ideas about the games change. So B1 tier 1 being already good before the update, that seems like a bad idea to me. Rather inaccurate representation of B1 tier 1's strength. Remember, it has to be specifically this uncharged version. If you take it to the Flash to tier 2 and do the half charged version, which looks almost the same, this is unchanged. It always used to be good. So have that in mind. Anyways, I'm out for now. Peace.